There's a website called thereligionofpeace.com. Savor that name for a moment, thereligionofpeace.com, that keeps a tally of the body count stemming from Islamic Jihad. In the month of September alone, more than 200 attacks resulted in over 2,900 innocent deaths and 4,500 critically injured. Every jihadist attack we hear about in the news represents dozens more that did not make the news. As our featured speaker tonight, Pam Geller, knows well, pointing out truths like this can get you branded as an Islamophobe, a racist, a bigot, or worse. But as the saying goes, if you're not catching flack, you're not over the target. Last year, the government of the United Kingdom barred her from entering the country, asserting that her presence would not be conducive to the public good. This was because she had the audacity to establish such groups as Stop the Islamization of America and the Freedom of Defense Initiative, which insist on telling the truth about Islam. Barring her entry to that nation was a despicable act of cowardice and submission by the government of a once great nation. This wasn't the first time Pamela Geller has fallen victim to the heckler's veto. In April 2013, an appearance at a Long Island synagogue was canceled due to security concerns. The following month, she was uninvited from an appearance in Toronto, sponsored by the Jewish Defense League of Canada. She tells the truth about Islam by many means. She's written 2 important books on the topic, one of which, as you heard Jerry say, is available for sale here tonight. In 2004, she founded a blog, Atlas Shrugs. A few years later, her readership exploded, the bad choice of words, expanded sharply, as a result of her courageous decision to exercise her First Amendment right to publish what were then known as the Muhammad cartoons, a series of images of the Prophet Muhammad drawn for a Danish newspaper that backed down in the face of threats from offended Islamists. She's a leader in the campaign against the Ground Zero Mosque in New York City. She's appeared on or been featured in numerous television shows and newspapers. She has placed ads on subways, buses, taxis, and billboards, drawing attention to the evil of Islamism and jihad, telling truths that make the defenders of Islam howl with impotent rage. In October of 2013, our featured speaker here was Ms. Geller's co-founder and co-author, Robert Spencer, who explained how political correctness about Islam is getting people killed. In May 2014, just a few months ago, we hosted Noni Darwish, who shared with us her intimate personal experience with Islam and the dark side of the revolutions in the Middle East. The existential threat posed by radical Islam deserves our attention like few other topics. And when I learned that the enemies of freedom want to shut her up, it makes me want to hear from her all the more. The topic tonight is the jihad against the US and Israel. I am delighted to welcome to the Conservative Forum of Silicon Valley a courageous, no-nonsense speaker of truth.
First of all, let me just tell you that coming from New York, just for today, just for this, to come to a room of happy warriors, it warms the cockles of my heart. I can't tell you how critical you are in this war. And make no mistake, we are at war. Make no mistake. I want to press this upon you because it's a different war. Everybody expects things to be exactly the same and to happen exactly the same way. This is going to be a long, bloody, and brutal struggle. And Operation Fetal Position is no way to win a war. And that's what we're doing. Not this room, but the West. There is a lack of civilizational self-esteem that we are signing our own death warrant. The idea that we are operating under such crippling rules of engagement, not just in the battlefield, but in the information battle space. This is where the war is. Make no mistake about it. All the bullets and the bombs and the bloodshed comes as a result of what happens in this war. And we are up against an enormous machine, a leftist Islamic media, or as I call them, the enemy-media. They are. They are the problem. I wrote a book on Obama. I wrote that book in 2007, 2008. And if anybody is scratching their head as to why he does what he does, read the book. Because I predicted it, not because I'm Cassandra, but because of who he is, where he came from, and how he thinks, and the prism in which he sees the world. But how does a man like that get to be the most powerful man in the world? There's a lot of evil people, a lot of incompetent people, a lot of people with a bad agenda who would like to be in the most powerful place. How did he get here? That's our problem. Obama's going to be gone. We're still going to have the problem. We must change the dialogue in the information battle space. The reason why we are at such a loss is the right is MIA. Evil is made possible by a vacuum. Evil wins by default, by moral default. And the right is absolutely absent. Now, I don't lament this because I live in a country, the very first country of its kind in the history of man. The very first country founded on this magnificent principle of individual rights. Everything noble and brilliant and magnificent that we achieved as a people was a logical fidelity to that principle, the principle of the individual. This is the battle we're fighting, by the way. It's always the battle. Now, 5,000 years ago, 5,000 years from now, God willing, we're still here, the individual versus the state. This is the battle. 100 years ago, it was Stalinism, or totalitarianism, or communism, or socialism, the National Workers' Socialist Party, the Nazi, against the individual. And of course now it's Islam, because there is no unique soul in Islam. Islam is state. Mosque is state. This is what we're fighting. We're not fighting Muslims. We're fighting an ideology. We're fighting a supremacist ideology that subjugates and oppresses the non-believer. That's what we're fighting. I want you to be clear. And it's a tough fight because the media is aligned with the jihad force. They self-enforce the Sharia. They do. In every jihad reportage, first of all, they generally don't report on it. And when they do, they scrub. They scrub-a-dub-dub the news. Look, last week's beheading of Colleen Hufford in the workplace was in and of itself a 9/11. I cannot impress upon you what happened that day. First of all, a couple things. I took screenshots of his Facebook page, Yakin Israel, a convert to Islam. It was all Islam, the page. Pictures of beheadings in progress, with the Quranic verse commanding it. 47:4, when you meet the unbeliever, strike them at their necks, smite them at their necks. He beheaded a woman in the workplace, and the FBI calls it workplace violence. How does that happen? It happens because the President of the United States scrubbed all counterterrorism materials of jihad and Islam. My colleague, Robert Spencer, broke the story of an informant that he has who was in that mosque, said that that mosque teaches about the caliphate, advances the caliphate, teaches a hatred of the United States, a hatred of the Jews, was celebrating on 9/11, and the President of the United States sent an envoy to that mosque with a note of thanks. A note of thanks. Look it up. I don't want you to take anything I say on my word. I want you to bet everything that I say. Every time there's a jihadi attack, the knee-jerk reaction from the Muslim community is backlash. Backlash that never happens. It's putting the victim, us, on the defense again. It's never about, well, what programs are the mosques instituting to counter jihad recruitment? I want to know, 14 years after 9/11, what programs have been instituted in the mosques to stop jihad recruitment, to expunge the Quran of the verses that call for the slaughter, the annihilation, the oppression and subjugation of the non-believer? Nothing. And I'm the bad guy. And I'm the bad guy. Islamophobia, page 75 of my book, was developed in an Islamic think tank, according to Abdul Rahman, as a thought-crushing device in which to silence all criticism of Islam. The fact is, Muslims should be standing with me against jihad. I don't. They always say, oh, your ads are against Muslim. No Muslim in my ad. They're painting all Muslims with a broad brush, not me. My ad says defeat jihad. So the media is implying that all Muslims support jihad. Is that not true? I know that there are Muslims that don't want to kill me. Hello? I just don't think I have to pat on the back every Muslim that doesn't want to kill me. That's my bar. I expect that. There is a problem in Islam. And the problem is we can't talk about the problem. Look at Europe. Look at Europe. That's where we're going to be in 10 years. Literally, they're going to be setting up city-states in and of themselves. There are already no-go zones. You must know about those, where even the police can't go, where they enforce the Sharia. Increasing in number. Tens of thousands of Muslims from Europe, Australia, Canada, the United States, Western countries are flocking to the Middle East to wage jihad. Why? What is the common thread? Well, Secretary of State Kerry says, you know, it's poverty. Poverty is what attracts them to it. Meanwhile, so many of them are affluent, come from affluent homes, go to private school, born and raised in the UK, born and raised in the United States. What's the common thread? Well, they're disaffected. It's disaffection. Poverty, disaffection, illiteracy, lie. The common thread is piety. The common thread is devout. The fact is, and again, this is another misnomer, radical Islam. The fact is, the Islamic State, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Mujahideen, Uzbek Mujahideen, the Chechnya, it's all jihad. It's all of a piece. Now, I'm one person. I'm one person, and I am fighting for freedom. That's what I do. I fight for freedom. People say, well, I can't, it's overwhelming, the problem's overwhelming, I can't solve it. I don't know why people think they have to cure the whole world. It's like you go to a doctor, the doctor doctor says, oh, everybody's so sick. I can't cure the whole world. I'm so sick, I can't do anything. Everybody's so sick. You cure in your circle of influence. I was in the New York subway system. I saw a viciously anti-Semitic ad. And it bothered me. And then I saw another one, and I said, well, I'm going to run an ad. So I ran this ad. In any war between the civilized man and the savage, support the civilized man. Support Israel. Defeat jihad. That ad was rejected. They said it was disparaging to all Muslims. You see Muslim in here? You see Islam in here? Any war against innocent civilians is savagery. The war against Israel is savage. They attack innocent civilians. They throw rockets, they fire rockets at schools and homes. That's what they do. That is savagery. This is true. My ad was rejected. And so I sued New York City MTA. With my law firm David Yerushalmi and Robert Muse, we sued, we won on all counts. Yeah. And not only did we win, but we wrote law. They had to throw out all their ad standards and regulations and rewrite everything. So now I run everything. This week in New York City, 6 ads of mine are up. In the wake of Obama saying the Islamic State is not Islamic. And a rose by any other name, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, really, this is how dangerous he is. He scrubs our counterterrorism materials. He forces sensitivity training given by Hamas groups. I didn't say that. The United States government said CAIR was an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorist funding trial in our nation's history, the Holy Land Foundation trial, and they were a Muslim Brotherhood proxy. This is who is advising President Obama. So, this was the first ad that I did, and this caused quite a brouhaha. And I want to tell you something. This ad was everywhere. I'm not just talking New York Times, NBC, ABC, CBS, Newsweek, Washington Post. I'm talking about the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, Le Monde, Jerusalem Post, and they ran all my ads every time they ran the story. They ran all the ads criticizing me, and they're all, you'll notice, this is another beautiful thing, this is the media. The racist, the hate monger, the Islamophobe, the anti-Islamic, the queen of Muslim bashers, the racist, Islamophobic, anti-Muslim bigot. Every news report labels me, smears me, but they run my ads. And if you ask me, is there a tipping point? Pamela, have you seen a difference from 2012 when you started running to now? I can tell you, the comments. The comment sections of all these newspapers are overwhelmingly in support of the ads. That's new. That's new. I am here to tell you something is happening. This ad said, yesterday's moderate is today's headline. Here's a picture of a young man in the music studio. He's a rapper with his Dr. Dre headphones on before becoming devout. Here is that same man holding a head. He was James Foley's execution. I had James Foley's picture here, but I switched it out of respect for the family. They asked me to take it out, and I did, because I have no desire to cause that family any more grief, whether that photo belongs to the national collective or not. And now it only took me to find this guy with another head, 30 seconds. After becoming devout. It's not Islamophobia, it's Islamorealism. That's what's running on buses. And this is going to be on 100 San Francisco buses next week. This ad is running. Hamas is ISIS. Hamas is Al-Qaeda. Hamas is Boko Haram. Hamas is CAIR in America. Jihad is jihad. not be afraid of the truth. You scream the truth from the mountaintops. The truth will set you free, and the truth will keep you free. Understand me. I know this is an ugly battle. I see every single peep. I came into this field, it was very crowded right after 9/11. And today I can tell you I feel like Scarlett O'Hara when she comes out of the room, when Miss Melly gives birth. And all of Charleston is the bodies laying on the ground. That's what I feel like. Everybody runs away from this. Why are there no elected officials here tonight? I mean, you are like, you know, I mean, seriously, I mean, you're like catnip, okay, to an elected official. Look at this, a room full of voters and influencers and whatnot and activists. This scares them to death because any politician that touches this subject is smeared, destroyed, defamed, and libeled. Ruined. We have to change the national dialogue. And that's why I do these ads. Not to be provocative. People say, oh, you do it to be provocative. I respond. That's what I do. When CAIR ran a campaign to rebrand jihad, I kid you not. Rebrand jihad. This was their ad. My jihad is to stay fit despite my busy schedule. So, I did a series of ads using high-profile Muslims with their actual quotes, like the Prime Minister of Turkey, Erdogan, said, "The mosques are our barracks, the domes are our helmets, the minarets are our bayonets, and the Muslim faithful are our soldiers." Whoa. And I ran this one. "Killing Jews is worship that draws us closer to Allah." That's a song that plays on Hamas TV. Now, here's an interesting aside. This ad was just rejected by New York City. Now, they can't reject on content because you know I won that lawsuit. Why did they reject this ad? This you're not going to believe. Because they said, because the CAIR ads, you know, my jihad is, you know, not burning my toast, because those ads didn't run in New York City, that people don't have context for this ad, the Killing Jews ads, and it might incite Muslims to kill Jews. It might incite violence. It might be taken literally. And I remember saying to my lawyer, isn't that Islamophobic? You know? I mean, really. So I can assure you we're suing, and I believe we'll win. There's no question in my mind. But all of the other ads are running. And that's what I do. I run these ads in response, and they get an enormous amount of publicity. Listen, this publicity is very ugly, but I believe that 1/3 of Americans can still think. And I believe that 1/3 of Americans are not getting the information. I believe they're misinformed, uninformed, or just not interested. But increasingly, believe me, what we saw in Oklahoma, in Vaughn Foods, that's not going to be the exception. First of all, another beheading was attempted at the Bellevue nursing home that day in Oklahoma. Plus, last year, most people don't know about it, but 2 Coptic Christians in New Jersey were beheaded by their Muslim neighbor. Most people don't know about that. In London, Lee Rigby was beheaded in the street. Palmyra Sylvia, a woman in her garden last month, was beheaded, broad daylight, by a Muslim. And the first thing they always say, first, before it's not terrorism. How do they know? How can you make such a rush to judgment? How do you put your own people in such jeopardy? How do you do that? We fight this war in the courtroom. I have 3 lawsuits now. This one, okay? I have this one. In Seattle, the FBI, State Department were running an ad. Faces of global terror. And they ran the world's leading terrorists. They happen to all be Muslim. So the Muslim community there got offended. Why would they get offended? They're terrorists. You're against that, right? You're against the hijackers, right? So why would you say, yeah, get those guys? Why are you offended? Are you a terrorist? So the FBI and the State Department took the ads down so as not to offend Muslims. Well, you know what? I took the exact same ad. I flipped out the FBI logo. I put in my logo, AFDI, and I submitted it to run. Same exact ad. It was rejected because it's insulting to Muslims. So that's a different lawsuit. But what happens is, these lawsuits get publicity, and people that are reading are like, you can't run a want ad because it's going to offend, I don't know who, you know? The relatives of these guys, you know, the sympathizers of these guys. The First Amendment is what worries me most. The First Amendment is not the 8th, not the 10th, not the 12th. It's the first because it's the most important. It's the first because it keeps us free. It is the most emphatic because it protects all ideas, not just ideas that we like. Because then who would decide what's good and what's forbidden? The government? The FBI? CAIR? They want to, under the guise of hate speech. I hate these hate speech laws. First of all, hate crime laws too. All crime is hate. All crime is hate. So the hate crime puts an aspect to it of thought crime. You were thinking this, you were saying this. All crime is hate. It should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Once you passed, and it was under Bush, legislation criminalizing hate crime, now you've opened the door to hate speech. And just last year, we heard the Department of Justice under Eric Holder said that they were going to criminalize postings on social media that were critical of Islam or offended Muslims. When I heard that, we held a rally, and this is another thing, another weapon we use. We called a rally for that meeting where it was being announced in Manchester, Tennessee. I said to everybody that was in my shouting range on Facebook, which is critical tool. We hate them, but we need them. I can't tell you how many times I was banned for running news stories. It doesn't matter. I can tell you that one of my stories gets circulated 1 million times. If not for Facebook, we're shuttered by the media. You can't find my links in news. Ha! But the Huffington Post, the puff hose, as I like to call them, they're first ones up there. That's not accidental. The Google algorithms are not accidental. So you are Facebook, and you are Twitter, and you have your own spheres of influence, and you have, whether it's Twitter or your email or you play tennis or you go to work, you have to talk to people. First, learn everything. Then start teaching. Because no one is going to save you. You are going to save you. That's what a republic of individuals based on individual rights does. We don't need a strong leader. Weak people need a strong leader. We have ourselves. But we've got to get into the fight. There's a war going on. And we see it. We see it with the masking of the workplace, imposing Muslim prayer times on non-Muslim workers. We see they're suing Heinz. They're suing Heinz to impose Muslim prayer times. Now, they always target companies that are very generous to their Muslim workers. Heinz has prayer rooms, they have prayer rugs. Now they're suing to stop the line. Let me tell you something. They don't stop the line in Muslim countries, ever. They make up the prayer. They make it up before work, they make it up after work, but here they want to stop the line. Why? It's a way of imposing Islam on the secular marketplace. They sued Target, they sued Walmart, because the cashiers didn't want to handle meat that's not halal. Well, then work in a halal butcher. Don't work in a place where there's halal meat. Not, you know. They sued and they won, and these are very costly lawsuits. Woman suing Disney because she wants to wear the hijab. So Disney says, okay, but we have a dress code here since 1957. So you work in the back. Oh no, I want to be on the main floor. So Disney designs a costume incorporating her religious Islamic garb. And she says, I'm not wearing that costume. I wasn't sure which costume she was referring to. But she's suing. It's a way of imposing Islam. They want a prayer room in a New Jersey school, and the New Jersey newspaper shows the child looking up at the camera like, all I want is a prayer room. And so the sucker, Westerner, says, give the kid a... Yeah, you set precedent. In Dearborn, in Michigan, they have schools using the lunchrooms as prayer rooms. I mean, you're setting dangerous precedent. They do not have prayer rooms for Christians. They do not have prayer rooms for Jews. They do not have prayer rooms for Hindus. They do not have a chapter dedicated to the Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, the way they have and I say Lord and Savior, even though I'm Jewish, because they say they have a chapter dedicated to the Prophet Muhammad. Hey, he's not my prophet, and I'm guaranteeing you he's not the prophet of 90% of the kids in the class. Don't call it the Prophet Muhammad unless you have a chapter on the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And that's how I would advise you to tackle this problem. I'm sure you have children, I'm sure you have grandchildren. I want you to look at their textbooks. I want you to see what they're learning. I want you to see what they're being taught. They're being taught the 5 pillars of Islam. Under the guise of Islamic history. They're not being taught Islamic history. They're not being taught about the jihadi wars, land appropriations, cultural annihilations, and enslavements. They're not being taught about the 90 million Hindus that have been slaughtered by the Muslims. They're not talking about the 1400-year jihad against the Jews. They're not even being taught that in every anti-Israel rally, from Paris to London, New York, to San Francisco, to Jerusalem, the chant is always the same. Kaiba, Kaiba, Ya Yahud, Seish Muhammad, Sayyahud. Go to YouTube. Search Kaiba, Kaiba. What does that mean? Kaiba, they're saying Kaiba, remember Jews. Remember Kaiba. You know, the Jews really, they were the Jews of Arabia. They occupied Arabia before Muhammad wiped out. He exterminated an entire tribe of Jews, beheaded every man and boy who was of age, beheaded them all after they had surrendered. He wiped out the Kharizit tribe. That's what they're saying. They're saying, Jews, remember. Remember Khaybar. Remember we wiped you out. The armies of Muhammad are coming. Khaybar, Khaybar, Ya Yahud, Seish Muhammad, Sayyahud. That is why I ran the ad of Hitler and the leader of the Muslim world at the time, the Mufti al-Husseini. A picture of them, not photoshopped, a picture of them together to show this has nothing to do with land. This Palestinian, is a marketing term that was developed after 67. Before that, it was called Greater Syria. And before that, before the Jews established a state in 48, Palestine was the Jewish state, where Palestinian Muslims and Palestinian Jews lived, and Palestinian Muslims were conducting pogroms against the Jews. Look it up. Look it up. This jihad against the Jews goes back 1,400 years. It's not about land. There will never be a two-state solution. The very existence of Israel is an insult and deeply offensive to every devout Muslim. There cannot be a Jewish state in the Middle East. Think about it. You will land from another planet. You see this tiny little itty-bitty country, 9 miles at its wide, surrounded by enormous Muslim lands. And they're telling you, oh no, these guys with that tiny little thing, it's all about land. You know, they stole land. It's ridiculous on its face. Now, that ad, when I go long, let me know. That ad is this one. Islamic Jew hatred, it's in the Quran. Two-thirds of all U.S. aid goes to Islamic countries. Stop racism. End all aid to Islamic countries. We love to talk about how Israel gets all this money, which, by the way, is loan guaranteed. But even so, 2/3 of all of our foreign aid go to Muslim countries, where they're oppressing, subjugating, and slaughtering. They've tied their narrative into the civil rights movement. Imagine this, the civil rights movement. And many African Americans have no clue that there's still slavery in Muslim countries. Mauritania, 20% of their population is enslaved, are black slaved by Muslims. The word for black in Arabic is abid, is slave. And they're giving me that they're a civil rights organization. And the media plays along. Every time you see the Council of American-Islamic Relations, the civil rights group, advocacy group, you see AFDI, hate group, AFDI. It's subtle, but it sinks in. And this is what we have to face. We have to change the narrative. And I don't care if I get bloodied, and I don't care if I get blistered, and I don't, because I am right, and I am righteous, and I have the truth on my side. I'm not going to do them all, but I want you to understand why I do what I do. There was a campaign up calling for the end of Israeli apartheid. Israeli apartheid, okay? They have Muslim MPs in the Knesset calling for the end of Israel. There's not a Jew left. In most Muslim countries, they were expelled. Close to 1 million were expelled from every Muslim country after 48. And they're giving us with the Islamic apartheid. Well, you know what I did? I said, okay. Israeli apartheid, I did an Islamic apartheid campaign. This is Islamic apartheid. Real pictures. Oh, and by the way, when I submit these ads to the MTA, I have to provide proof of everything I say. Multiple pieces of proof. And when I said to the MTA in DC, another lawsuit I won, by the way, when I said, what proof does the American Muslims for Palestine offer of Israeli apartheid? They said, no, that's just an opinion. You're stating fact. Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. This is what I deal with. You know what? It's okay. I provide proof. So this is Islamic apartheid, gay under Islamic law, stop U.S. aid to Muslim countries. I ran a bunch of them. I ran a black child enslaved, Mauritania. 20% of its population are blacks enslaved by Muslims. I ran this is Islamic apartheid, the road to Mecca. And I show an actual sign, Muslims only, and the road for non-Muslims. The dirty, filthy kafir. That's not apartheid. That's not apartheid. What is? This is Islamic apartheid. In many Islamic countries, rape victims are tortured or killed unless they agree to marry their rapists. Stop U.S. aid to Islamic countries. I hit back with the truth, and this is why I make them so crazy. So I'm going to close because I want to be able to take questions. But I want you to know that Islamophobia is a club. It's a club to silence you. That's what it is. There's nothing wrong with being afraid of having your neck hacked with a 6-inch knife. There's nothing wrong with wanting to go to work and not worry about a plane going into your building. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be free and being able to say anything you want to say. We live in such a state we don't even realize it. Do you remember when you were young, you used to go to the airport? What fun it was? We live in a police state. I can't even tell you how disgusting it is to fly. And if they, God forbid, I'm wearing a bra with a thing in it, call JTTF. You know, I'm serious. You can't go into a building in New York City without being carded and recorded. And we've become inured to it. But why? Who are we at war with? Have you been to Washington, D.C. lately? It's in lockdown. Who's the enemy? I'm the enemy. That's where we are. We have to change the dialogue. We have to educate our children. I see grandparents in this audience. I see grandparents. You bring them next time. They don't want to come? No Christmas. Listen, this is their fight. I grew up free. I lived my life. I had my children. I know what I'm fighting for. This is their fight. They've got to get into the fight. And it's overwhelming because in that case, it's not just the media and the culture. And they're getting their news from Jon Stewart. I mean, he's just a sharp, useless tool. But the schools are inculcating them in this toxic ooze of leftist marinade. It's terrible. But you, family, this is the core of an individual. This is where you make the difference. And you support candidates. You support candidates who will speak about this. We don't want to, we're not targeting all Muslims. We want Muslims to address the ideology that calls for the conquest, the imperialistic takeover of the world. And believe me, if you think it's crazy, the Islamic State now controls whole swaths of Iraq and Syria, larger than the nation of the UK. And Boko Haram, who beheaded 7 prominent businessmen yesterday, controls area larger than Ireland. I mean, the Islamic State planted a flag at NATO's door. What's next? The White House? This is a real threat. This is a real threat. And we have to, there are no bystanders. If you're a bystander, you're part of the problem. You will be called names. You will be derided. You'll be called a racist. You can calmly tell them that Islam is not a race. I mean, this is the level of deception that we're on. We cannot speak candidly, and we must. I use the law. I use ads. And I use protests. And believe me, those protests at Ground Zero is what stopped that mosque. And we stopped that mosque. And that's because people came. When they saw 35,000, 40 people at Ground Zero, oh yeah, that changed. And believe me, the president wanted it. He made at the iftar dinner. Remember, he made the announcement at the iftar dinner, and Bloomberg wanted it. Remember what Bloomberg said? If we don't build this mosque, the terrorists will win. That mosque would have been Mecca on the Hudson. Let me tell you, exactly. They changed the name. Oh, you remember it was Cordoba? And then I was on the air talking about Cordoba and how Christians and Jews were lived under dimitude under the Caliph of Cordoba. And they said, okay, Park Place, and the media would seamlessly, without even missing a beat. Park Place, the media is the enemy. You need to subscribe to Atlas Shrugs. It's free. I update 15 times a day. You need to post it to your Facebook. You need to post it to your Twitter. When you wake up in the morning, you got to rub your eyes and say, what am I going to do today to save the Republic? You will not like what comes after America. Listen to me. You've got to get involved in the fight. And look, all great intellectual movements were started by a small group. And I believe that's who we are. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for a full house. I want to thank you for having me. Do me a favor, buy the books, because that's how they pay me, and that's how I pay for ads. Because really, you know, nobody with a name wants to support those ads. It scares people. Because, you know, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. You are the answer. You are going to save this country. You are going to save freedom. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
So, my first question, you say we're fighting an ideology, Islamism, but 70 years ago we could have said we were fighting Nazism. To win that war, we had to defeat Nazis, not just Nazism. Any comments on what it is we have to do to win this war?
Well, I believe that we need a comprehensive strategy, and we don't have one. And the questioner is right. You can't just, you can't just go and, even like Bush. Bush, on the one hand, was going in, and you could argue about Iraq, but believe me, this problem was not going away. I would have gone into Iran. It doesn't matter. It wasn't going away. So you can't just go in like gunship battle diplomacy, so to speak. You need a comprehensive strategy. You can't sanction Muslim Brotherhood groups at home. You know? You can't do that. With Obama, he's sided with the jihad force every time. From the minute he got into office, he invited the Muslim Brotherhood to his speech in CAIR, remember? June 2009. He invited them, outlawed. They were outlawed. They were outlawed. Mubarak could not even go to President Obama's speech or his cabinet because the Muslim Brotherhood was there. He supported them. He punished the Egyptian people when they threw off the yoke of Islamic tyranny, when 33 million took to the street and removed the Muslim Brotherhood. He stood with the jihadists in Libya. He even turned over the security of our Benghazi consulate to an al-Qaeda-linked group. How do you think they knew where Stevens was? How do you think they knew where the fuel tanks were to blow them up? He is aligned with the jihad force in Libya, in Syria. Let me tell you something. You can say what you want, but these moderate al-Qaeda, that's like a chaste prostitute. No, he said he's arming moderate al-Qaeda in Syria, al-Nusra, and there are some bad cats. No, any compromise between good and evil profits. And so many of the victories that the Islamic State won in Syria was with American weaponry. We have an incoherent policy. We need a comprehensive policy saying, look, we don't care if you worship a stone. Just don't stone us with it. That's where the line is. Jihad is the line. I don't care if they worship Allah, but once they go into the violent verses, then we have a problem. And I would like to know what is being done to expunge the Quran of the text and teachings that call for the slaughter, subjugation, and oppression of non-Muslims. I'd like to know. Nothing. This is the problem. To this man's point, this is the problem. You can't go in. Who are you bombing? It's the same thing. Look, I don't know if I have any juice, but I wanted to just quote a couple of statistics, and I didn't want to do it off the top of my head. But, okay. All right, forget it. But the percentages of Muslims that want Sharia is deeply problematic. It's like 94% in Afghanistan, 75% worldwide, 25% of American Muslims support suicide bombings. There's a problem, and we're not allowed to talk about it. Next question.
The Democratic Party is no friend of Israel. Why are so many Jews liberals and or supporters of the Democratic Party?
Well, first of all, the Democratic Party is the party of treason. That they could sign on for what's going on now and not say anything. Even Panetta. Really? You little weasel, where were you when it was happening? I mean, you have to say, why is he doing that? For Hillary? Maybe he wants to be VP? I'm sorry. Where are you? The country is in the toilet, and now you wrote a book. And so I'm sorry. I'm not going for it. Let's talk about the question at hand. I find that liberal Jews are, by and large, godless. They worship at the Church of Human Secularism. Their religion is their politics. Religious Jews are very much on the right. Really, I mean, I know it's 76, 25, 80, 20. Well, that's what it is. Look, is it any different than it was how many thousands of years ago when Moses went up and the guy downstairs is like, yeah, golden calf. That's them. They're the golden calf. Come on. I mean, really, so what are you worried about? The truth is, you live from within, you're on the right side, and we can't lose. I know we can't lose. What worries me is at what cost. That's what I fear, and what I've feared all along. You know, this Islamic State, this global jihad, I've been writing about this for years and years. Many of my Indigo Red is here, he knows, I've been writing about it for years and years, and of course I was called a kook and a right-wing conspiracy theorist. But let me tell you something. There's conspiracy theory and there's conspiracy fact, and the global jihad is a conspiracy fact. Next question. I hope I answered the question with the Jewish liberal.
So I've got 3 or 4 questions all on the same theme here. Are you in any personal danger? How do you keep yourself safe?
Well, I get a lot of death threats. I turn them over to law enforcement. The really serious ones go to JTTF, Joint Terrorism Task Force. On a night like tonight, I didn't publicize it, and generally I'm not really worried about like hardcore, like jihadis being in this group, you know? And they have armed guards here. I always have I always have 1 or 2 armed guys with me, always. And if you're going to get me, which is fine, you're going to get it too. Okay, I mean, you know, that's the best I can do. People say, you know, aren't you afraid? I'm afraid of doing nothing. Look what happened to the UK. They banned me for not being conducive to the public good, and they haven't even seen me dance. But they allow in hate preachers. They allow in the worst of the worst. They're finished. I'm suing the Queen, by the way. No. As a matter of fact, I can't lie, it's my most favorite lawsuit, because every time I get paperwork it says, Pamela Geller and Robert versus the Queen. It's fantastic. And I'm going to pursue that all the way. I'm going to expose them, even if I lose. I will expose them. Yeah.
How do you monitor or stop mosques from inciting jihad without violating the First Amendment, freedom of speech and association?
The First Amendment does not protect treason. The First Amendment does not protect sedition. The First Amendment does not cover the overthrow of the American government. I mean, this is not even complicated. Somebody said to me on a talk show, you know, you're yelling fire in a crowded movie theater. I said, there's a fire. I'm telling you, it's like shooting goldfish in a barrel. But it's ridiculous. Mosques that are advancing, preaching jihad should be shut down. They're doing it in Europe. It's almost too late. But they should be shut down. That's all there is to it. You go, you pray to Allah. Look, people don't even know that when Muslims pray 5 times a day, when they get down and they pray 5 times a day, they're cursing Christians and Jews in that prayer. Every 17 times, a total of 17 times a day. Now, I don't believe that most Muslims in America know that. I don't think they speak Arabic, and I don't think they know that. I do think if they knew, some would go that way, because it means giving up Allah, it means giving up the basic tenets. It's a big, big deal. It's a problem, and I understand that it's a problem, but by doing nothing about it, look where we are. We're being subsumed by this. And think about the money we spend on all this nonsensical defense, you know, patting down grandma, patting down 6-year-olds, burkas walking through. It's ridiculous. And I'm telling you, they will eventually crush us in this. We've got to adopt rational, logical defense systems. It's not complicated. Yeah.
Sorry, my battery's getting a little low here. I've studied Islam for years, says the questioner, but trying to explain to the uninitiated just makes their eyes glaze over. How can I make it simple enough to spark interest?
It's a very good question. I don't know, I think beheadings spark a lot of interest. And then you have to pull that quote, 47:4, when you meet the unbeliever, strike them at their neck. That's what they cite. That's what they're citing. The fact that 67% of the Quran is dedicated to the non-believer. And then when people say to you, I know everything, when people say to you, you know, the Bible is violent too, there's a lot of violence in the Bible. Well, a couple things. First of all, the violence in the Old Testament and the New Testament is descriptive. It's describing events, describing many times one-time events. The violence in the Quran is prescriptive. It's an overarching command for all time. That's a big difference. And if I might point out that small but important fact, that Christians are not running around slaughtering people, screaming, Jesus Christ Akbar! And Jews are not running around screaming Hashem Akbar, killing people. Why can't we talk about this? 23,000 deadly Islamic attacks since 9/11, each one with the imprimatur of a Muslim cleric.
How do you suggest we find out what's happening in Islamic centers in our own neighborhoods?
That's the tricky part. You know, 9 times out of 10 you really need an informant, because you saw with the beheaders mosque, they came out and said all these things, kumbaya, but what was going on was completely different. And the informant, you saw when he was on Hannity last night, was completely covered up. I mean, his life is in danger. When I speak about it, I go back to my crib. They have to go back to their communities. And as we've seen with honor killings, you know, I did this campaign. I did an honor killing campaign. I did an honor killing campaign using only American girls who had been honor killed in America. This was Amina and Sarah Saeed, and it said, honor killing victims, is your family threatening you? We have helped girls get into safe houses. Oh, I know, the media never talks about that aspect of my work. Shaka. Do you know that Muslim cab drivers were taking these ads down and putting it in the trunk and then putting it back up when they took it back to the garage? Now again, if it's not true and it's not Islamic, why wouldn't you want these ads up? Why would you put them in your trunk and hide it? And this is the point of the campaigns. Now, they did a campaign, Palestinian refugees have a right to return. First of all, they never left, okay? No. The Jews, being Jews, said, don't go, let's live together, you know? And they said, and their leaders, the Muslim leaders said, you leave, we're gonna wipe out the Jews in 3 days and then you can come back. They left. So this right of return is nonsense. And also, after the British Empire destroyed the Ottoman Caliphate, you remember the Caliphate was the Ottoman Empire, defeated by the British Empire. You notice how the Brits carved up the Middle East. Give me a ruler. Here's Syria. Here's Iraq. We'll give them all of it. The only one people are crying about is this tiny little piece of Jewish land. You notice? No one's crying about Iraq's borders, right? Syria, Jordan. There are 2 states, Israel and Jordan. Those are the 2 states. Anyway, I answered that ad about right to return. I answered that ad, and it said, what did I do? So many ads, so little time. I ran this one. The Palestinian Authority kills any Muslim who sells land to a Jew. When they take me on, I got to tell you. And to this one, Palestinian refugees have the right to return. I ran. The Palestinian Authority is calling for a Jew-free state, equal rights for Jews. So of course it warmed the cockles of my heart when I heard Bibi Netanyahu use Jew-free state the other day. It's saying that Obama's calling for a Jew-free state. He's talking. I wish that he, not only talked, but also acted. So we'll work on him with that one. But at least, he's really a clear voice. And and him saying Hamas is ISIS, it's very, it's good that people are, that someone is saying it outside of, someone on the world stage. Anyway, so I answer everything, and this is why I do what I do. These lies cannot stand unchallenged. This is the key. And you go to work, and there's plenty of times you hear things and you don't say anything. I know it. I see it in your faces. You're guilty. Open your mouth. The left says such crazy stuff. And you're on here, you're thinking, boy, that person's crazy. But they're saying it. They're talking. Their tongue is flapping. Like my grandmother would say in Yiddish, your tongue has no bones. Speak up. You're right. And you have an argument. And you can make it. And that's why the 2 books I have is the Obama book, which explains who, what, why. It's all fact, all sourced. Major book. Took years. The Stop the Islamization book explains in much more detail than I could do here, the workplace, the public square, speech and so on. And then it's a primer of how to fight it in your town, what one person can do. Hey, look, if history has taught us anything, it's that the individual can change the course of human events. Of this there is no doubt. Yeah?
All right, I've got a couple of questions that are connected. I'm just going to ask them both here. Since the jihadists rule Islam, how can we accept the so-called moderate Muslims? They are irrelevant. And the connected question is, how can Muslims be either extreme or moderate when they all follow one Quran?
Well, it's degrees, meaning there's a lot of Muslims that are secular. You see them. They drink, they this, they that, they don't go to mosque. They're not your problem. To this man's point, this is the fundamental, this is the elemental problem. The moderates have no theological leg to stand on. This is the problem. Because under Islam, unlike the Old Testament, the New Testament, which was written by men, the Quran is the word of Allah, seared into the imagination of Muhammad, into the memory, not imagination, a little Freudian slip there. Seared into the memory of Muhammad. So one of the laws under the Sharia is, because it is the word of Allah, it's immutable. It's unchangeable. You cannot reinterpret it. You cannot reform it. If you attempt to reinterpret the Quran, it is the crime of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy, like apostasy, apostasy, leaving Islam, you're killed. Apostasy, hypocrisy is punishable by death. So the moderates do have a problem. What is needed? That's a good question. A reformation is needed. Just the way Christianity and Judaism, Vatican II. Islam needs a Vatican II. It's never had a reformation. And we're not doing anything to bring that about. And I think that it was a missed opportunity after 9/11. I think George Bush, he was, I think he was genuinely clueless, thinking, there were these moderates, and he didn't understand the double talk and the taqiyya. Taqiyya under Islam is you're to lie, you're to deceive to advance Islam, particularly in non-Muslim countries, in order to, advance the cause. And taqiyya is a religious imperative, so it's not lying, and you're doing a good deed. And so I think he really bought into it. I think Obama is different. I think Obama knows exactly what he's doing. I think Obama is aligned with the jihad force. There's no question in my mind. It's why he didn't respond during Benghazi. It's why he is literally, painted Israel into this terrible corner, and espousing the Hamas rhetoric, and even advanced the Hamas ceasefire when they were raining their rockets down on Israel. So I think it was a missed opportunity after 9/11 because America, everybody was listening. And that would have been the time to if it were me and I was president, I would have gathered the world's leading scholars on Islam. I would have had Ibn Warq there. I would have had Bernard Lewis, who I have no use for, because anyone that glosses over the period of dimitude under the Ottomans, I think is, it's enormously irresponsible for a scholar so revered to gloss over that period, which was horrible. If one is interested, an excellent book on the Jews in Islam is by Sir Martin Gilbert. It's called In Ishmael's House, A History of the Jews in Muslim Lands. And you will be blown away. The season of the jizya was beyond brutal and bloody and torturous and humiliating and horrible. And they had to turn over like 95% of their earnings. That was the jizya, the poll tax. You have three choices in Islam. Convert, and you've seen this with Islamic State. Convert or die or live as a dhimma. In a period, dimitude. Dimitude is a subclass status, denied basic human rights, and subject to a poll tax. And when you hear Muslims talk about this, it's kind of funny. They go, oh no, it was for protection. It was a protection tax. Protection from who? And it's so you're paying to live. You're paying to live as a non-Muslim. But it's an exorbitant tax, and the season of the jizya for Christians and Jews was just unimaginable, unspeakable. And so people need to learn about what's happening, and I think that it was a terrible missed opportunity. I really do. And I don't know what we're going to see in 16. I don't even know if we can get a legit election in 16. I know Romney's thinking of coming back. Romney is a 20th century candidate. We need a fighter, man. I mean, we need someone who's, and I'm not talking about evil. No, you don't have to be evil, but you got to know how to fight. I mean, it was funny, I was on a Hannity show, when he does those audience, and in the audience he said, who here, it was September 2012, who here believes that Romney's going to win? And everyone's hand went up except mine and Steve Bannon of Breitbart. He's the CEO of Breitbart. And I just didn't see it, because this guy's playing, he's playing badminton, and this guy's throwing knives. I mean, and I had a little hope after the first debate, but after that, I mean, happy to give it away, the foreign policy, oh my God, I would have been spitting bullets. We need a fighter. And I'm going to tell you, our prospects are, I don't know, not great. And we have to win by a large margin, because the voting process is so corrupt, and there's so much fraud that every time someone goes, oh, it's a tight race, I know what that means, we lost. They'll open up Al Franken's trunk, and they'll take out 10,000 ballots. Which is what they did. Norm Coleman won. He won. And they took it away from him. So it's very frightening. That's why we all have to get involved. If you have time, go to run for your school board. Be a poll watcher. You have to do something. Freedom is not free. And it's increasingly in jeopardy, It's really a very frightening time we're living in. Yeah. Long answer, sorry about that.
Speaking of jeopardy, next question. With ISIS on the march and the left and the Obama administration in the U.S. supporting the so-called Arab Spring, is there anything that's going to stop the caliphate?
First of all, there was no Arab Spring. I just want to make that perfectly clear. And it's interesting, and I'd love to run this, because in January of 2011, I was saying this is not an Arab Spring, this is the Muslim Brotherhood. And the left was making such fun of me, so I love running those front pages every once in a while. The blogger who still loves Mubarak, that kind of stuff. The only real freedom revolution was under Bush. I'm not such a Bushy, I gotta tell you. I have my problems with him in a big way. But the fact is, the Rose Revolution, the Cedar Revolution, these were real revolutions. And when he said to Iran, if you rise up, we'll be there. They did rise up. 6 months after he left office. That was the first and last of the freedom movements. In Iran, June 2009, they were in the street. You know how you can tell? It's a freedom movement. It's not hard. You have to be a rocket scientist. It was led by women. And they weren't screaming Allahu Akbar. Women with hijab, women with eyeliner, women with high heels. And they mowed them down in the street. And he did nothing. Remember, they were asking about, he's in the ice cream store with his 2 daughters eating ice cream. He's so fantastic. Neda Sultan, you remember that beautiful girl? Remember she's standing there 1 minute and then she's got blood pouring out of every orifice in the next minute? She was the icon of the Iranian Revolution. That was the last revolution. And you saw the signs, Obama, you're either with us or you're against us. We are sorry for 1979. They had those signs up. That was a game changer.
In English.
That was a game changer. In English, yes. That was a game changer because you would have cut off the head of the snake. Iran is Hezbollah. Iran is funding Hamas. Iran gave all those rockets to Hamas. Iran is funding Taliban. Iran is the head of the snake and has been at war with us since 1979. That was a historical opportunity. And he did nothing, but boy, he couldn't move fast enough to oust Mubarak, our ally for 30 years, first Muslim country to make a peace with the Jews. He's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. People say he's naive. He's not naive. People could say he's dithering. He's not dithering. He's a bad guy. I'm telling you, he's a bad guy. Look, he just doesn't have the American DNA. I know. No, wait, no. America is not a race, and America is not a creed, and America is not a color. America is a shared value system. That's what America is. When people talk about American exceptionalism, and everybody gets their nose out of joint. Remember they asked him if he believed in American exceptionalism, Obama? Well, I believe in it like I believe in British exceptionalism and Greek exceptionalism too. No, there is American exceptionalism. What is it? I'll tell you what it is. It's individual exceptionalism. It's the exaltation of the individual, man's moral value, to embody a man in whole spirit, created equal, and unleash him into the universe, hurl him into the world. That was what made us great. Now, I don't know anymore. I don't know where we are now. It's impossible to do business. The government makes it impossible. Individual rights is completely being subsumed by collectivism and statism in this country. So I don't know. But he didn't grow up here. He grew up in Jakarta. He went to school in Indonesia from the ages of 6 to 12. He studied Quran. He was a #1 in his class for recitation. And even when his mother left him with the grandma and he went to Hawaii, remember, Hawaii at that time was only a state for a couple of years. They were very hostile towards the mainland. He didn't get that thing that you get in living in a free country, with your country. You know? That's why.
All right, this questioner says, we've seen pictures of thousands of Muslims Muslim man blocking traffic on Madison Avenue in New York City. How is this allowed?
Okay. First of all, I get those pictures at least twice a day for the past 2 years. I just want to say something officially. This is being recorded. Those are my pictures. I took them. Okay? And what that is the Muslim Day Parade. Every year in September, always around 9/11, they have their Muslim Day Parade. And they start off with a prayer on Madison Avenue, and that's what that is. And it's interesting you should bring that up. This year, this parade was so outrageous. They had constructed a gallows. Yeah, do me a favor when you go home. Google Muslim Day Parade Pamela Geller, and I want you to see those pictures. They constructed gallows, and they had a mannequin in a burqa, in the Islamic art. She was hanging. They had, I don't know what he was, in a chariot. I don't know, was he Pharaoh? I don't know. And he's whipping with a fake whip people. They had fake AK-47s. They were, you have to see the pictures on Madison Avenue, these big giant goons with giant guns. Yeah. How is that allowed on Madison Avenue? That's the real question. That answers your question. It's not every Friday.
And as I recall, they also had girls in cages.
Oh, thank you. Well, look, he's a reader. They had young girls in white burqas with no face veil in cages. Girls in cages. What the symbol was of that is, in New York City, it's frightening to me. The media didn't cover it. Media didn't cover it. Let me tell you something. This past summer, when Hamas was doing its thing against Israel, I held a rally in Union Square, and I had the leader of the Yazidis, Haydar Elias. He spoke. I had the leader of the Coptic Christians. He spoke. I had the leader of the Hindus. He spoke. I had leaders from every persecuted minority. The media was there. They didn't run one word. And I got to tell you, that Yazidi speaker shattered everybody. The media is the enemy. The media is aligned with the jihad force. You can ask why? Because they love control. It's a struggle. The struggle is the individual, which the left is completely against, versus the state. They're with the state. Right now, the left and the Islamic Alliance is the enemy of my enemy. They both hate America. So they joined. What's going to happen after that? They both think they're going to kill each other. That's what they think.
All right, this next one is a poser. If you can answer, you're a lot smarter than I am. How can we make the GOP more outspoken about the threat of jihad?
The GOP has been bought and paid for. This is what most people don't understand. There is enormous money. Enormous. I remember even with CAIR reporting on 50 million that they got in 2007, and then they stopped reporting. Remember, they lost their status, but Holder gave it right back to them. But there's enormous money, and Grover Norquist, who is the most powerful influence peddler, the most powerful conservative fixer behind the scenes, is a Muslim Brotherhood operative. I have run copies of the checks made out to him by Alamoudi. Alamoudi, who was everyone's favorite moderate, until it was discovered that he was the largest financier of Al-Qaeda in this country, and he's serving now 23 years.
He's married to a Muslim woman.
Palestinian woman, that's right. He is, but that marriage is a beard. She's a beard, and he does what? I don't want to talk about it. But the fact is, they're very smart, they're very shrewd, okay? They go into small cities, small towns, small villages, Wyoming, Montana. They see a guy, an up-and-coming guy like Mr. Ty, who came out here before, who's running. They don't know Grover Norquist from Adam. He puts on his mask. What's Grover's mask? Tax reform. Everybody loves tax reform. He's the fiscal conservative. And he schmeichels them, gives them money. Doesn't take a lot to buy a small-town politician, and they own him. And I'm going to tell you that a lot of our people are owned. A lot of our people are owned. You need money. You need money to run. You need money to win. You need money to get reelected. and they're spreading it like mad. Spreading it like mad, and nobody cares. You know, in my book, the Obama book, at the time in 2008, I broke the story of Obama getting foreign contributions. I don't know if you remember that story. Yes, that was my story. I went through thousands of pages of SEC documents. Contributions from Gaza. You know? Yes, and that's illegal. No foreign money can come into election coffers. What happened? Nothing. I sent a whole package. I documented the whole package. I sent it to the FEC. I also sent it, at the time, to David Keene, who is the president of the American Conservative Union. Who's on Keene's board? Grover Norquist. Suhail Khan. Why do you think they never asked me to speak, or Robin Spencer to speak, or Wafa Sultan, or to speak at CPAC? I always hold an event there, because I don't care. I always hold an event there. It's always full. I have to turn people away. Always. And there's a barely attended many times. Because to me, it's 12,000 conservatives, good people who don't know that the ACU is being run by Islamic supremacists. Yeah. So that's what I do. That's how I get around it. This is what you have to do. It's war. We can't complain. Oh, the playing field's not fair. Oh, this is war. War's not fair. It's not pretty and it's not fair. You just deal. What are the cards? What do we got? Let's go. Let's kill some people. I mean that metaphorically. Get a call for the killing of people in a meeting in Silicon Valley. You know what I'm saying is true. Yeah. Metaphorically.
We still have a big stack of questions, but let me boil it down to just a couple left. I apologize to those of you whose questions I didn't get to. The first one is a little bit more of a comment than a question, but I want to get your response. This is from somebody who says, I lived in Libya in the 70s. They didn't necessarily like how Gaddafi treated them, but they loved his politics and his terrorism, and they still do. And let me add to that comment. When Palestinians are given the right to vote, they elect terrorists to lead them. Any comments on that?
Yeah. First of all, Gaddafi was no prince. Let's be straight. I'm certainly not going to be a cheerleader for Gaddafi, but there's worse. And there's no way, as President of the United States, I mean, here I was writing about the Islamic State 2.5 years ago. I'm open source. You have CIA, NSA, you're listening to everybody. Maybe you're listening to the wrong people. I mean, how do you not know? Gaddafi, where was the statecraft? Statecraft is when you're planning and you're looking at the global chessboard. So if we do this, what does this mean in 20 years? What does this mean in 30 years? My God, he's thinking, what does this mean on Tuesday morning? No statecraft. In overthrowing Gaddafi, who was, as I said, a bad guy, there's worse. Look, Libya has now degenerated to a complete state of jihad chaos. The jihadists control the oil. We lost Mali, became a terrorist state. He contained the jihad threat. Look at what's happening across Africa. Even Kenya, once the light of democracy, is being consumed by the jihadists. That disgusting, brutal, bloody attack on the Westgate Mall, an upscale mall that a lot of Westerners go to, that was a multinational militia of Muslims. They were all from different countries, and it was led, one of the leaders was the British widow, the convert. Again, what's the common thread? What's the common thread? And you saw during that gruesome slaughter in that mall, they were separating the Muslims from the non-Muslims. We see this every time. We saw it with Mumbai. If you're a Muslim, you let go. They tested everybody. Now, what bothered me when I heard that story is if they're testing, what was Muhammad's mother's name? If you didn't know it, they gouged your eyes out. Why one Muslim couldn't yell out Amina? One righteous Muslim couldn't yell out the answer? That bothered me. I gotta tell you. That really bothered me. So I would have kept Gaddafi there. I would have kept Gaddafi there. And maybe I would have, looked and supported someone with a little bit more pro-freedom. Same thing with Mubarak. Let me tell you something. If you talk to Egyptians, and I was in touch with a lot of Egyptian bloggers at the time, there were liberal reforms being made. Those liberal reforms stopped in 2006 when the Democrats took over the Congress and Pelosi went to Syria to meet with Assad. What she whispered in his ear, I'll never know. But that's when the pressure was off. Bush was applying pressure. We have pressure. We're giving them 300, or how many billion a year? You can apply pressure. So you look for someone who will make these reforms, but to completely abandon. What was he doing there? What was Obama doing there? We don't get our oil from there. The French do. Let them fight it. And the way he died, could you imagine if Saddam Hussein died that way? Saddam Hussein was put on trial by his people, judge, jury, verdict, he was hung. Gaddafi was taken into the street, beaten and raped bloody, and murdered in the most heinous way. What if that happened under Bush? What if Bush said corpseman 40 times? 57 states. Austrian language. What if I'll never forget, one time Bush was in China, he finished walking, and he finished talking, he walked to the door was locked. So he went and tried to open it, the door didn't open. Oh my God, how I saw that door didn't open on a million endless loops. They didn't know how to make fun of him. And according to Cheryl Atkinson, the CBS reporter who left CBS because she couldn't take how, in the tank the media was. Not free, self-censoring. At least with Pravda, you knew that it was Russia. You knew it was state-run media. Here it's voluntary state-run media. Cheryl Atkinson said, the media waits every day for the narrative to come out of the White House. And then they go. We're in trouble. Okay, is that it?
Let's wrap it up.
Buy my books.